Energy Realities 97, Spirit Cooker. We are live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Good morning, good afternoon to all.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
David, please let me start with you. Spirit Cooker. What
Sure,
is the
put me on the spot,
interpretation
Armando.
of this expression? Sorry?
Put me on the spot. Here we go. Let's explain this.
Yes, please.
Please.
Please go ahead.
Well, I have Spirit Cooker. So last week we got the big news that the replacement for John Kerry as the White House climate envoy, excuse me, I've forgotten the term, will be none other than longtime Democratic Party activist John Podesta, who unfortunately for America shows up with a significant role in every Democratic administration for the last 30 years. Mr. Podesta, the whole Spirit Cooker thing is Mr. Podesta famously, I don't know if she's still his girlfriend, but he had a girlfriend several years back when all his emails leaked and created such a problem for the Hillary Clinton campaign in 2016, who was in fact a witch who engages in spirit cooking practice, which is a form of devil worshiping, and so he got
Sorry, what?
No
it with
idea.
that association. Oh yes, this is all well documented fact. And Mr. Podesta, thanks to photos taken in his residence that have been leaked online, has a very large collection of satanic works of art in his home, and so he is well associated with that facet of our society. This is who our new climate envoy, who will be traveling the world on private jets, just like John Kerry did, to make speeches at climate conferences like, I guess, COP29. And if Biden gets reelected, then at the World Economic Forum confabs in Davos each year, and I think that's perfectly appropriate. Quite honestly, in fact, I predicted the day Kerry announced he was resigning in mid-January that John Podesta would be his replacement. He's actually the perfect representative for this administration.
Yeah.
But are there other interpretations for this expression, Spirit Cooker?
Spirit Cooker? Well, I don't know. Maybe there are. I haven't bothered to go out to Wikipedia and see. I'm sure Wikipedia has a very long and detailed page on the habit.
Perfect. Great. Tim, yeah, sure, Stuart, please.
I got an easy one for any man that
it?
gets married. Their spirit is cooked as soon as they're married.
Ooh.
Oh my God.
Sorry.
But
Yeah.
we're
That
here
is
for an
so
EV roast, right?
Yeah. Okay, tell me, please. Apparently, EVs bring some symptoms to the society. What would you see the unintended consequence of growth of EVs?
Well, we saw a few headlines, which I'm sure we'll be talking about a little bit later, about the unintended consequences of electric vehicles. First of all, is that the weight of the vehicles are so huge that it makes it difficult for safety issues with respect to guardrails, which I will be talking about, and not just the weight for things like that, but for roads and the wear and the tires. And then we've got the unintended consequences of the materials that are comprised in the EV. So they use a lot of copper. There's a lot of copper in their charging stations. And on the West Coast, there's been gangs of thieves going around cracking open the chargers and stripping out the copper. And what's really fascinating is that the copper is then taken to a metal recycler. It's recycled. It's sent back to China, where it's put into a new charger, and then sent back to to California or wherever, where it's then stolen again, and the cycle repeats itself. So, one of the unintended
economy.
It's a circular economy for sure, but it's one of these unintended consequences where it increases crime. if you think about it that
Right.
way, or because these thieves are going around and stealing the copper. Now, of course,
Oh,
there was lots of other crime going on with SUVs, and before it was Mercedes, with the little logo on the front, and people were stealing
yeah.
things and so on. And there's obviously normal car thefts, but I think one of the unintended consequences is this, because there is such a reliance on these minerals and materials that are worth quite a lot right now, that some people choose to embark upon a life of crime in order to have a benefit from those things.
Hey, Tammy, the good part, though, is if they just limit their thievery to the state of California and limit their individual thefts to no more than $995 worth of copper, then they won't be prosecuted for it. I mean, so, that's the key to that whole scam, is just do it in California and be careful exactly how much you steal on each occasion. And you can just keep doing it forever.
Yeah,
up to $1,000.
up to
Right,
just under $1,000.
$995.
Yeah, just
With
under
the-
1,000.
With the new pricing, that's as far as you can steal then, David, is the size of this pen I'm holding.
Oh my God. Impressive. Irina, all we know that you are an expert in planning. And what EV planners do most these days? Number one, promote research, science, and education. Number two, provide subsidies and ICE bans.
It's the latter, I'm afraid. And I don't think that there's been a whole lot of planning from what we have been hearing and reading lately about EVs, what Tammy said, and she'll talk about it more later when we get to the headlines. But it seems to me that with all these problems with electric cars popping up every day, it seems, really, reports of problems with EVs have increased substantially in the past couple of months or so. And winter is one reason, because turns out EVs do not perform as well as they should in winter, and people are suddenly surprised, even though other people have been warning about it. Now we have revelations about the wear and tear of tires on roads, because EVs are so much heavier and their tires wear out more quickly, and there's particle emissions from these tires, and the guardrails problem, and the destruction of roads because of their weight. And let me tell you that I know exactly how road destruction looks when you suddenly increase traffic on a stretch of road, because we recently had such a case on the road that passes by our village that leads into town. I don't know if you remember, there was some protests from the coal power plants, and protesters closed off the highway, so traffic had to be redirected on our 2-lane road. And we're having a massive increase in potholes because of that sudden increase in traffic, including by trucks. So imagine millions of heavier EVs going on roads. There will be road destruction. And on and on and on. It seems that the planners of the EV revolution, that continues to be just about to take off, but is not taking off, did not plan for any of these things. Not that there were secrets or, discoveries to be made. All of these things could be calculated in advance.
Yes.
I think they just said, we'll just spend some money on chargers and on subsidies, and we'll just ban other cars. Job done.
And it will happen. And it will
And
happen.
it will happen. Yeah, people will want to buy them. Oh yeah, incidentally, the insurance rates are through the roof for EVs, and nobody wants to buy a second-hand EV.
Yeah.
Good.
It's all working
Very
out just fine.
Yeah. Totally fine. Yeah.
Great. To concluding
Guten Tag.
this first.
Good and talk to you too.
Hello, Patrick. Good to see you again.
Hello. Good to see you. Stuart, before we go to the headlines, I would like to ask you the following. Some countries are defining EVs as the only car types in their territories. For instance, we have an
Yeah.
example here. My question for you, before we go to the headlines, Stuart, is the US ready to do the same?
Excuse me while I get airsick. I'm going to get my airsick bag and just come over here and then throw up. I'll be right back in just a sec. No, this is terrible. There's only two reasons that people are doing this. And I want to ask a question of our live listeners out there. Over Christmas, did anybody else besides me have a family fight with somebody that is a electric car renewable zealot when I told them that they were an idiot, and the family Christmas was ruined at that particular moment? I just said you're an idiot. Okay, so when we take a look at the EV, why did Ford cut it out? So Biden's in Richmond, backing the unions and going out there, and then the unions are all losing their jobs because the American people are waking up. And Irina, it's also tied, and Tammy, it's tied to the farmers. There is a great awakening going on when we're tired of having these Green New Deals shoved up our nose.
Careful, Stu.
And that's why I said nose. And so I didn't want this to turn into a family gathering where you guys ostracized me. And so,
We would never.
and so when we sit back, Armando, what a great question, because when you look at Toyota is going nuts with their hybrids. Irina and I have talked about hybrids for a long time. I'm in on a hybrid. Let me have
Me
a hybrid.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, give me a hybrid. I'm all in, but I got to have a 350 pickup to tow, everything I need. So I'm going to have a hybrid in my 350 Ford pickup just because I can. Anyway, there's a great awakening, Armando, and a quick answer. I also do not want to be driving down the road like that guy I saw on Twitter or X with a Apple headset on, driving a Cybertruck, going, okay, he's letting the truck drive with an Apple headset on. I'm sorry. That's worse than my wife putting makeup on. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm waiting for
Okay.
there to be a hybrid tractor, because with respect to farming, they keep telling, like what I hear in Canada is that you can use these electric tractors, and they were writing these stories about somebody with a little hobby farm has an electric tractor,
Sure.
and he gets all of 2 hours of work out of it, and then he's got to recharge for 10 hours or some ridiculous thing. How does that
Sounds great.
work for like seeding, where you got to get the crop in, and harvesting when you got to get it off before weather changes, but you have to wait for charging? And how are you going to get the tractor back to your yard? And so is there going to be a hybrid tractor? That's what I would like to know. Is there research going on?
Oh, but it can't work in Washington State, because David, didn't Washington State just ban all outdoor leaf blowers, lawnmowers, tractors?
Wow. Yeah. Well, that doesn't
Tractors.
surprise me. That's
That's
a
surprising.
California move, and it's the West Coast. So,
It's
yeah,
West
Bravo.
I
Coast.
don't doubt that at all.
Okay. Okay. Let's start going to David, please. Your headlines, our first one.
Well, I picked this one. I have to admit, it's purely self-centered, because I read this editorial in the Washington Post last week, written by the left-wing zealots on the editorial board at the Washington Post, titled "Biden's LNG decision is a win for political symbolism, not the climate." And I read that, and I just marveled at the fact that it read just like something I had written and would have written, that making the exact same points against the LNG permitting delay that I had made in the Telegraph and in the Daily Caller and in Forbes and at my Substack. And this is the first time I can remember being in full and complete agreement with the editorial board at the Washington Post, which frankly makes me want to rethink exactly my opinion on this decision ought to be, because that's dangerous territory to be in. I just thought it was ironic, and it just really, I think, puts a kind of a period on the fact that, or the reality of just how awful and counterproductive that decision by the Biden White House truly is, for not just for the LNG industry, but for the United States as a reliable trading partner. It's really just a sop to the left wing climate alarmist funders of Democrat political campaigns, and nothing more than that. And when you've lost the Washington Post editorial board, President Biden, you have lost.
If I can add there, like within minutes of that decision being made, the environmentalists in Canada were saying, let's stop LNG in Canada, even though we haven't even exported anything yet. So because I think it's supposed to come online later this year or something, the very first one on the West Coast. But they're like, oh, maybe we should be reconsidering because America's doing this. I'm like, oh my gosh, that didn't take long.
And David, how do you see Europe dependence on this LNG from the US?
Well, and that's the nub of the whole thing, right? I mean, Europe, because of Putin's war in Ukraine, has lost access to Russian natural gas, on which countries like Germany and some others had become so reliant. And their alternative was to go to the LNG markets and rapidly build out their own import capacity and regas capacity for LNG. And they become highly dependent on the United States LNG industry for their economic, growth there in Europe, many of those countries. And so, you have the United States, which has historically really outpaced most of the rest of the world in terms of having a predictable regulatory and legal structure and predictable enforcement of the laws and regulations on the books. And investors from all over the world and trading partners from all over the world have invested trillions of dollars over the year in the United States and its economy based on that faith of the predictability and consistency of the laws and regulations, and the faith that they know the government is going to enforce those laws and regulations in an even-handed way. This decision is just like the day one decision by President Biden to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline. It does severe damage to both of those concepts, and is going to have the impact inevitably of loss of trading partners, loss of billions of dollars in investments in the U.S. economy, and a destruction of the United States reputation as a reliable trading partner. And those things are terrible for the country. And, the people in the Biden administration have to be fully aware of that.
So
Patrick Devine. Yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
No, go ahead, David.
LNG is a pole to keep Europe's tent erected until they sort out a plan to move ahead with renewables. Yeah, well, and that could be forever.
Probably will be.
All of our lifetimes anyway.
David, your second headlines, please.
Biden taps Podesta. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. The second part of that headline is really interesting, and I touched on it a minute ago, but didn't really go into detail. People will remember the email scandal, Hillary Clinton's illegal email server that was kept in the basement.
Private computer.
Right. It was kept. The server was in the bathroom, actually, of a third-party server company in Colorado Springs, Colorado, I think. And it caused a real scandal in the midst of the presidential campaign in 2016. Well, the emails that leaked publicly were from John Podesta's account. And he and Hillary Clinton had traded literally thousands of emails while she was Secretary of State in the Obama administration. And a lot of those communications showed a great deal of coordination in the project during the Obama years that ended up selling 20% of United States uranium reserves to Russia. Okay, Russia. which the Democratic Party wants you to believe is the sworn enemy of the United States and the biggest danger to our society. And that's kind of ironic too, is Podesta is one of these Washington, D.C. creatures who, despite being embroiled in a series of scandals really over the past 30 years, always manages to fail upwards. He'll get involved in a scandal, he'll lose the current job he's got, and 2 or 3 years later, he reappears in a different Democratic administration at a higher level job. And, so here he is. Now he's our unelected, unconfirmed by the Senate climate envoy.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because it's David anniversary this week, he has a chance to have 3 headlines.
Was this mine?
Yeah.
So Volvo, Volvo cut off funding. Well, so I was on a radio. I do a Monday afternoon radio program, and the host kind of caught me off guard last week with this story, and he had kind of misread the story, saying that Volvo had cut off all funding for its electric vehicles production. What it really cut off funding for was for Polestar, a third-party joint venture that it was involved in with a Chinese EV maker for the last, 28 years. Polestar was created in 1996. It was one of the very earliest pure electric vehicle companies that went into business 8 years before Tesla did, and has been really not much of a success and has never really made any money. And finally, I guess Volvo ended up getting its management ended up getting so much pressure from its investors, they finally decided to abandon Polestar. The Chinese company, whose name I'm going to forget here, will now become the 100% owner of Polestar. If you buy Polestar, just recognize you're supporting now the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah.
They're cool looking cars, though, just like all the EVs. They're always cool looking. So you got that going for you. In Arizona, driverless car companies submitted applications for permits for them to operate on freeways.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect
What could go
idea.
wrong with that?
Nothing at all.
Great. Okay. Irina, our planning expert, please go ahead.
Could I just please first answer? There's a question from a listener.
Sure.
From LinkedIn user. I don't know if I could. Thank you.
Oh.
So the question is, do the farmers in Europe even have a farm use fuel choice where they aren't taxed as much as automobile use diesel, which I imagine is taxed through the nose in the EU like gasoline? I don't know if they have a choice. I have heard that heavy machinery for farming purposes runs on diesel. So they have to buy diesel to run their machines. What the protests are about, ostensibly, is plans by some European governments, France notably, and Germany notably, to cut and eventually phase out the subsidies that they provide farmers with for their diesel fuel. This diesel for farmers is subsidized, and they want to reduce the subsidies and eventually phase them out because, the Green New Deal and let's go all electric even in farming. So yes, I don't know about the choice, but I don't think they have a choice. They have subsidized diesel, and they are afraid they are going to lose it, which is why they are protesting, because they won't survive. It's as simple as that. Supermarkets are buying cheap and selling expensive, and farmers are on the brink of survival, thanks in no small part to the European Union's green policies. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, I don't know what regenerative braking would be useless, but I'm willing to agree. I think Mihai knows what he's talking about. So, about green hydrogen, my favorite fuel carrier. So, green hydrogen is the only viable route for aviation and shipping. It's a smashing headline because you can just visualize all the ships and airplanes running on green hydrogen. which is not exactly what the author is saying. The author, by the way, is an advocate for green hydrogen, but she makes some quite rational points, such as the point that green hydrogen is very expensive to produce and the process of producing it is not very energy efficient, which suggests that production will inevitably be limited for a very long time to come. So her suggestion is that we do not use green hydrogen indiscriminately for every industrial sector, but rather those sectors that can be electrified should be electrified, and we should reserve what green hydrogen we could produce for the impossible to electrify sectors such as shipping and aviation. And she says that acknowledging the limitations of green hydrogen and acknowledging that the fact that it will be yet a very long time before we can scale up, by we I mean Europe, can scale up green hydrogen production to any levels that would be meaningful, to use in any industry. Still, she says that is the only viable route for aviation and shipping, which I'm not sure is the case, to be honest.
Great. Let's go to the other one. Please, Irina, it's yours.
Yes, the European solar industry is in a state of massive crisis.
Of course.
That's not funny at all because nobody could have predicted it.
Right.
Basically, this is the problem. There's a lot of produced but unsold solar panels in Europe, and they have no chance of being sold because they're a lot more expensive than Chinese panels, which are very competitive in terms of quality and especially in terms of price. And even those are sitting in warehouses because there's not enough demand for solar panels in Europe right now. But because European manufacturers of solar panels have much higher production costs, their survival is now in question, and the industry is proposing that the European Union sets up a special fund to buy out all these panels that have already been produced to allow the industry to survive. That's totally not government intervention in an industry to keep it alive artificially, of course. And there was a very funny remark by one of these industry insiders saying, but the Chinese are selling below production cost. Yes, they are selling below your production cost,
Right.
because your
production
production cost is
Yeah.
very
It's high.
because you're producing your panels in Europe.
Well, isn't the solution though to find a segment of the population that the solar panel manufacturers can enslave for the free labor like China has?
No,
Isn't
they
my
that
still
the
God.
solution here?
no,
Oh my God.
they still have to pay for the energy they would use in the manufacturing process.
Yeah,
In
which is
Brazil, we call
significant.
this procedure local content or market protection.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Irina.
Oh, by the
Tammy.
way, the LinkedIn user is Travis Lynn. So thank you,
Oh, Travis
Travis.
Hi,
Lynn, yes.
Travis. Thanks
Yeah.
for the question. Great question, by the way.
And Pseudoscientist has a couple comments here I thought I would just put on.
Sure.
David, do you want to read those out?
Buying an EV is backing communism. It kills the West economy, and ultimately China imports 75 to 85% of their oil. They need EVs and want the West to finance its tech.
Yeah, maybe. But they also want to kind of take over the industry, right? So if you
Yeah.
have putting out of business the Western automakers, and now there's all these calls to say, oh, Chinese EVs are really cheap. Let's import them in. And now in the UK, they're saying, well, this could be a problem because of security issues with respect to all the cameras, and it's processing data everywhere it goes and all this kind of thing. So
Yeah.
now there's hesitation to import the Chinese EVs. And then Pseudoscientist also has a comment here about the hydrogen
Yeah,
and
good
shipping.
comment.
Nuclear ships like carriers is the answer, sure. But then many will convert nuclear powered container ships onto carry. I'm not sure what that means.
Can you imagine container ships fueled by
Powered by
nuclear?
nuclear.
Or I guess it's better than the wind that they're trying to go back to.
Oh,
which is-
yeah,
Would that-
yeah,
would-
yeah. Wind powered
would-
ships.
Would the nuclear power on the container ship be a problem when they're carrying EVs that light on fires that you can't put out?
I know. I was thinking
I
about
don't
that
know.
too. Oh my gosh.
I'm not sure that'd be a hazard
There
or
will
not.
have to be safeguards. Very,
Yeah.
very.
Guardrails.
serious
We'll find
safeguards.
out the hard
That's
way,
not going to
right?
be expensive at all.
Yeah.
What about a hydrogen carrier that blows up like the Hindenburg? In Texas, we call that blowed up.
Float up.
That would be bad. And then Patrick has a couple questions here about uranium.
How much of the uranium made it to Iran? The U.S. uranium that we sold to the Russians, I assume, that Hillary Clinton facilitated that deal. I don't know. I think that's a good question. Somebody ought to research.
Yeah, it's true. They do. It does have chemical markers.
Well, considering Patrick, great question. I think with the billions of dollars that the U.S. administration has allowed Iran, was it 80 billion, Tammy, you talked about? I think with
A lot.
it used to be 400,000 barrels per day when President Trump was in office. They're up to, I think, 3.5 million, 3.4 million barrels per day because the sanctions don't work as intended, as Irina says, which I love that phrase. They never work as intended. And I have a t-shirt here with that. And so I think it's pretty funny that you have, if they could afford the uranium, if they did, Patrick. How's that for an answer?
Uh,
one.
yeah, Tammy, please go ahead with your first headline.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about before, about one of these unintended consequences, that there's this increase in green crime. And I forgot to mention that it's not just the EV chargers and the EVs that are being ripped apart for their copper. It's also wind turbines in remote locations where they go up there and they break into the nacelle or wherever and strip out the copper. And they also do it to the solar panels and the cables that go to the solar arrays. So yeah, copper theft is a big deal now because the price of copper has gone up so high, and there is a bit of a growing shortage, or at least projection of shortages for copper for the energy transition, the forced transition. Yeah.
Do they cut the lines and bring
Yeah.
the material?
They cut the
Yes.
cables.
They cut the cables, pull them out, load them onto the truck, take it to the recycling place. And sometimes, like the article suggests that in some instances, there's swaps for drugs or whatever instead of actual money. So it, in order to keep it sort of under the
Wow.
radar. So
You pay
That's
for
one way to
drugs
avoid taxes.
with copper. It's amazing.
I've never heard of money laundering through drugs. How sad is that? I really Tammy.
yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Oh, if I can just say, I found a stat here, Stu, and in December 23, Iran's crude oil production was 3.1 million barrels a day.
Thank you. I knew I loved you.
Tammy, your second headline, please.
Well, I mean, the West has put so much of its political capital into the idea of electric vehicles, but the way I see it is a lot of the policymakers knew it wasn't going to work, and the whole point is to get people out of their cars. I mean, if you read what they talk about, for example, in the UK Absolute Zero Plan, which was put forward by the Climate Change Committee, it's all about very few cars. Whatever cars are out there will be ride sharing, like Ubers or whatever. Those will be electric. But the people are supposed to be encouraged to walk, number one, bike, number two, take public transit, number three, and if you must, call an Uber. So this is the sort of mentality behind a lot of the policies. But when the electric car sort of thing starts to fail because it doesn't work in a cold climate and whatnot, you have to remember what some of the policy proposals out there, what the long-term trajectory is, and that's to get you out of your car.
And I completely agree with that. I fully endorse Tammy's comment there.
Yeah, interesting. Very important.
So can I add here, Mihai has a comment about the
Sure.
hydrogen arena.
Right, the
Low-hanging
low-hanging fruit
fruit.
for clean hydrogen is to replace the huge amounts of hydrogen already used as a chemical feed. So I agree, mostly produced from coal and methane, and these are some huge amounts of hydrogen.
But that's not green.
It's not green, but you have to make the production capacity for green hydrogen like overnight, which is not going to happen. It's really, really expensive still, even in Spain, which has some big plans for green hydrogen, I hear, because it has so much sun. But does it have the water, is my question.
Good point.
Good question.
It's a question. Good question. Stuart, before we go to do your headlines, you sent to me a video. Please let me share this.
Largest deposit of lithium in the world. The lightweight metal is known as white gold because it's essential for making rechargeable batteries that power things like computers, mobile phones, and electric cars. The lithium here in Chile is locked away in underground saltwater, or brine. Billions of gallons are pumped to the surface every year, where it is left to evaporate and concentrate. It can take around 18 months for the brine to move through the series of ponds. The concentrated lithium brine is then processed into lithium carbonate, which is then taken to another factory near the coast where it is purified into battery-grade lithium. It can take more than 1,000 gallons of brine to produce enough lithium for just one electric car battery.
It's not
Wow.
Stuart. So it's you.
That's
Professor
nuts.
Stuart.
Oh, that's a little bit of an eco-friendly system I just love the theme. So spirit cooking could also mean that they got to cook the brine and then they have all them things down there. So it's pretty pathetic when we think about the child abuse, the ecological disaster. That's my Oklahoma coming out. And so when you sit back and think about that, guys, it's just disgusting how much ecological damage is done in the name of greenies.
It is.
David, I actually love the fact that you got a laugh out of that. I just
Yeah,
made
no,
my
I mean, look, you're right, man. I mean, it's people, but what percentage of the American public do you think is even modestly aware of any of that? 1% maybe, if
10%.
we're lucky.
10?
I doubt 10% are. I would suspect it's substantially less than 10%.
Patrick's comment, the toxic waste from the lithium process is another issue not receiving attention.
Of course,
That is some of the biggest stuff with the renewables. When you have an EV that has the battery, and I know that Irene has talked about this, and David and Tammy, you guys, and Armanda, it is you drive it for 4,000 miles and you have to replace your tire. And then it is the battery that is $20,000, and the new car is $30,000. And you try to buy all these used EVs from Hertz that David was talking about. You're going to have to say, here's a $30,000 EV, and now you got to put in within a year the $30,000 to $40,000 for the battery replacement. But it's the recycling and the end of life. You can recycle an ICE car and really do quite well on making the money when you munch it up, peel everything out of it. It's a nice system. There's nothing that you can do on the solar panels other than ship it to Africa like the slugs that we are in the West, and makes me airsick that these things are so toxic. And then a wind farm is $800,000 just to remove the cement and steel, which are carbon heavy at the end of life. And nobody is even paying for that. So that's ruined the farmlands. My head's exploding with the recycling thing.
Well, with the EVs, the batteries, I saw a program where there's a couple of smaller companies that are trialing different ways in order to recycle the batteries to
Right.
where they process it and separate it out. And that's really energy intensive, takes a long time, it's very expensive. So I'm not really sure, unless governments force companies to do it and make them pay for it, it's problematic how you do it. And there is actually a lot of waste, water and whatnot out of that as well. So I don't know. It's hit and miss. I think they still need to do more research, but this is another thing where it's putting the cart before the horse. We want to have all this stuff, but the things aren't there yet to make it so. So yet the governments are still pushing ahead 100%.
But it's
Oh.
just around the corner.
Just around the corner.
Yeah,
Gotta try
because it's
harder.
easier this way. It's easier. They've gone too far. They can't
Yeah.
walk it all back now.
Yeah.
Well, they
They
can, but they don't
They
want to.
can, yeah, but they're going to
Yeah, but their egos are now wrapped up in it
Exactly. Yeah.
and reputation.
You know, oil. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Sorry.
I view the market for hydrogen gas as an aerospace, SpaceX. There's absolutely no need for Earthlings to force the entire development world to converting to a green, blue, green, hydrogen, rainbow. I
Absolutely.
added that generation when we're blessed with Boku.
Boku.
Yeah, thank you, Irina. Oklahoma would be Bohu. Reserves carbon natural resources.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Boku is a Louisiana word.
Oh, thank you. But didn't they take it from the French?
Yes.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Boku is
Okay.
French.
Okay, bad joke. Sorry.
SpaceX uses methane for its
They do?
launches. Yeah.
But
pretty
the
sure.
other one, the one run by the Amazon guy, uses hydrogen.
Bezos. Okay.
Bezos, yeah.
The Amazon guy.
Blue Origin. Got it.
Amazon
Okay.
guy.
Blue Origin.
Armando,
Sure.
you keep trying to bring this headline up. Oil firms forced to consider full climate effects of new drilling following landmark Norwegian court ruling. Holy smokes, Batman. And when we sit back and take a look, Norway is, I believe it's the most used per capita of EVs because of their great hydrogen that the hydropower they sell. They're blessed with a lot of resources for low cost, and it makes sense in that kind of environment.
And a
until-
tiny population.
yeah,
And a
thank
tiny
you.
population. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
so but it's the first order, second order, and third order magnitude of the which I think that there is a failure in the energy transition, which is not necessarily a transition. And so as the Greens are losing power, you're going to see more dramatic legal system problems that they're going to put in, and more regulatory issues. The legal system has been taken over by the left through the left's academia world in getting that done. This is a whole systemic thing showing up. How can an oil company be responsible for scope 3 emissions as this is leading to when you're drilling for oil and natural gas, but you're going to have to get charged for the scope 3 emissions that you have no control over because Britney Spears and the Swifties are flying around on hydrogen that's made from new natural gas as a green. Holy smokes. Thank you, Armando.
What does full climate effect mean?
What is
the full part? It confuses me.
It means whatever the spirit
In-
cooker says it
Yeah.
means.
Exactly. How could you know what the full climate effects are? Or
You have
there
to
will
take-
be a convenient consultancy to tell you exactly what these
Yes.
full climate
Exactly.
effects
And-
Using a forward-looking scenario analysis to determine what your full climate effects are.
Yeah,
And it's in a lo-
models.
Right,
And-
and models, and it's in alignment with the EU new EFRAG rules that come in that are in effect this year.
Yeah.
I
So
think
the
it's
companies would have to fill this out anyway.
I think it's the wealth transfer that they realize the wind farms are failing. The EVs are failing, and forgive me and David's over there going, looking at Stu's talking to the WEF. They're calling right now. Schwab is calling me saying, "Hey, dude." So, it's a wealth transfer and the carbon tax. And this is a way to, again, the only way they're going to keep power is the wealth transfer. Is that a fair statement, guys, or am I smoking crack?
It also puts private companies out of business. So then the only ones left are the state oil firms in developing nations or the Middle East. So,
What she
if,
said.
Good point. Good point.
Right.
Good point. Stuart, your second.
Okay, everybody, we were all sitting here talking about second order effects on EVs, and I kind of lost it on whether David and I were going to go test the EVs hitting guardrails on that story. But India to increase coal-fired capacity by 2024 is the most in the last years. Tammy, as you and I had talked about with a global energy monitoring thing, there are currently 6,500 coal-fired units. And when we look at under construction, there are 404 coal-fired plants. There's actually more than that. And I think you're right. I've been checking their numbers. And you look at the map on this, and it's 2 in South Africa, 5 in South Africa, and then the rest of it is in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and China.
Yeah.
Kazakhstan, Romania, and Turkey are where the rest of the coal, all those 402 are coming in. It looks like me when I was a teenager with the red dots all over it, where they were, my acne was bad. And this looks like acne in this part of the world. Coal is just going nuts.
Yeah, they need cheap energy. That's the way to get it.
Well,
and
sure.
their citizens want it and need it, right?
Exactly.
And it's an election year. So the Modi government is like, well, people want reliable, affordable energy. The best way to do it is coal. Let's build more coal. And what I find interesting is that I think it was last spring, India came out and said they were going to have a moratorium on new coal permissions. And then in the fall, they said, well, I think we need to reconsider that. And then now we have this where they're going to be approving 6 times more than they have in the past how many years. So where are the activists celebrating?
Yeah, and they're cutting state support for the transition of state-owned oil firms too.
Yeah.
So apparently it can be done. You can reconsider. You can change your mind. Look at India.
That's right. The people want affordable energy.
Exactly.
And food.
And food.
Let me share with you almost 8% of sales in the US of cars in 2023 are EVs. It's not a big number, in my opinion, David.
No.
In my opinion, would be much higher, this number, but small.
Yes, but bigger numbers are just around the corner.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Does that include the EV sales for rental car companies?
Probably yes. Yes, probably yes.
Oh,
Right,
it
yes.
definitely includes the Chevy Bolt, which was discontinued late in the year.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, but
yeah.
it's not a big
There's
number.
that.
Not a big number. But see the opposite vision from Mark Mills.
That's
important
very,
guy.
very good story. I read this earlier today.
Yeah, tapping the brakes.
Yeah,
it's
very
Electric
sober
vehicles
take
not
on
going
it.
well. So still dead on arrival. My God, it's a very strong statement, no?
Yes.
But correct. And Mark has done a ton of work documenting that, by the way.
Yeah.
He's you want a real source on the limitations of electric vehicles, just take a look at what Mark Mills writes about it.
We always focus on mining and very, very important thoughts. Really is.
Great story. Very informative.
Mark Mills is a cool cat. I've been interviewed him twice.
Oh yeah.
And when he is a beyond rock star. I believe he's at the Manhattan Institute.
Yeah.
And
We could
but-
invite him to come to our podcast.
I
Sure.
will reach out to
He'd
him.
probably do it. Yeah.
Absolutely. He is a phenomenal man.
Yeah. So
His
he-
knowledge on the whole minerals aspect of
Yes.
the transition
exactly.
is amazing. Really amazing.
Because you should have him on the podcast.
Yeah,
So
I think
going
so.
to the conclusions, people, battery swapping is taking off in China and probably very soon in the US. I'm not sure they are talking seriously because to change a battery, you need to go to the gym and to eat spinach to replace 800 kilograms battery each day. I cannot understand this, guys.
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
I'm here to pump you up.
So the idea that you could just swap out your battery so you don't have to worry about charging seems like a good
Oh,
idea
wow.
on the surface. But let's say you've bought your car and it's new, and you go into a place and someone whose car is 5 years old has swapped out their battery. Now you have that old battery in your new car. I mean, how does that work, right? You go into a slot where it's only new batteries versus these ones are 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old. How does that work precisely?
I never thought I'd have to practice safe EV, kind of like college dating. Holy smokes. Sorry.
China and France have EV
Exactly.
graveyards because no one knows. Well, sure, yeah, and then we've got EV graveyards in America too. They're just not quite the scale yet that they are in China, but they will be because of this exact problem. No one wants to buy the used ones, and no one knows how to safely dispose, mainly of the batteries. The rest of the cars, just metal.
Metal.
Plastic.
Yeah.
Another comment. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I think it was
No.
Joanna's.
Joanna's.
Yes,
Mm.
John.
Hello, Janet.
Mark is at the TPPF. Yeah, TPPF, Texas Public Policy Foundation, is a great foundation, really good think tank based in Austin, really smart people there.
Yeah.
I know some of them, and they're really terrific.
Thank you, Joanna. Well, thank you so much for this nice conversation this Monday.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. It's
Morning.
always
Lots of fun.
fun. I can't wait to rewatch this. I'm going to laugh for an hour.
Thanks to all the questions. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day.
Have a great
All
day.
right. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.